Hey everybody, it's Mike from the Kick Sugar Summit. How are you? 2018 version. I'm here today with Sandra. How do you pronounce your last name, Sandra?
Elia.
Elia. Sandra Elia from Canada, who has an amazing story, just an amazing story. I'm so excited to hear about it. I'm so excited we were just talking to you. She uses the word food addiction and she was a morbidly obese woman, and now she's a certified food addiction counselor, one of the first in the world, I understand. And that's awesome. I know a couple of those folks that teach that stuff at the Food Addiction Institute. And, we've had them on our event, actually, in the last year. So, Sandra, I always want folks to tell their story, and from someone. A lot of people come for the weight loss. They think that, that obviously sugar is a part of it. They don't really tie the addiction part in. They don't kind of put the food addiction part together. They just think that, a little less sugar in their diet would help. So why don't you tell your story? How did it evolve for you? Go back as far as you want, because I think it's important, and just tell us the whole story. It really, we of all the messages and emails and everything we get, those seem to be the most important parts of our message, because people can relate with a different person. That's why we have 20 or 30 people on the summit. So go ahead.
Sure. I mean, how far back do you want me to go? How much do we have?
I want to tell you it's relevant. And, a lot of people, when they do as much work as you've obviously done, they start to understand where this all started and how it didn't just magically appear. So, maybe it was in childhood, maybe it was, how their parents treated sugar in the house or food in the house or whatever, or maybe they were aware enough or became aware enough in hindsight to see how sugar was damping down their emotions or manipulating with their feelings. So,
yeah. Well, I think my story is similar to a lot of other food addicts, that my ramp up to becoming a food addict was definitely trauma in childhood. The food supply, though, today, I would say, is definitely chemically engineered to be highly addictive. And so I was born in the early 70s and really grew up in the 80s, when I think that intense combinations of sugar, salt, and fat were just taking off. And also at a time in my life when I was going through really horrible, traumatic time for my family and for myself. And just to give you a little bit of background, my mother herself was a food addict, and she also suffered from bipolar disorder. And she died at 69 from food addiction. Of course, her death certificate won't say food addiction. It'll say that she died from post-operative pneumonia. But when you're 69 years old and you fall and you break your hip and you have hip surgery, generally you don't die 5 days later unless you're so heavy that it's difficult to get you up and moving. And you can't, at that weight, get up and start doing physio right away. And so, of course, her lungs filled up with fluid and she passed away. But we need to start recognizing more and more that this disease kills. And so definitely that kind of eating behavior was modeled for me. And because she was bipolar and often unmedicated throughout my childhood, emotionally she wasn't available to me. So, and I didn't actually realize that till a little bit later in life when I had my own daughter and started interacting with her in ways that felt beautiful and wonderful. And I would flash back to my own childhood and go, oh my gosh, was somebody supposed to do that with me? Like, was somebody supposed to make sure that I ate breakfast? And was somebody supposed to make sure that I bathed? And, all these things that I do naturally as a mother. And I'm, going back to my own childhood and the level of neglect that I sustained as a result of her mental illness. But one thing was always available. We were Italian. My parents were immigrants to this country. So food was plentiful. There was always as much food that I wanted at any time of day or night available to me without restriction. And so I sought it. I sought it for comfort, for love, and I could feel the comfort very quickly. I didn't come into this world. A lot of people say they're born and they're food addicts. I don't think that's true of me. I can remember the first 4 or 5 years of my life being an extremely picky eater. I really didn't like food, I wasn't interested. I was more curious about life. I knew that this upset my mother to no end, that I wouldn't eat. And I kind of liked that because that was the only time she sort of paid attention to me. But I also realized that if I did eat, it would make her happy. And so the sicker that she got, and the more that I ate, it seemed to appease her a bit. But over time, what happens, with all food addicts is a little bit of food would do it, and then I needed more, and then I needed more, and then I needed more. And so, get into my teen years, and my childhood's, not as bad as it was. Things are working themselves out. I'm spending less time with my mother, developing my own friendships, but now I'm kind of hooked on food. And so maybe at that time during childhood, I needed the food, and it was a great source of comfort and a coping mechanism. Now I don't need the comfort as much, but I'm addicted. I'm addicted to it. And so I'm just eating, out of habit. I'm eating because that's what I've always done. I'm now beginning the cycles of diets, which are really horrible. I say today, if I want to gain weight, I go on a diet. And that's, I went on my last diet in my mid-20s, and I lost 50 pounds in 6 months. So it was a very restrictive diet. And what happened, what I realize now, I didn't know at the time, was that I created an artificial famine. But my brain's job is to keep me alive. And it has no idea that there was no famine at this time in Toronto, that there was no food scarcity for me. So my brain went into survival mode. I only could stay on that restrictive diet for 6 months. And then my brain just drove up the signals to find food, seek food, and eat as much food as I could get my hands on. And it wasn't just any kind of food, right? Our brains are smart. It looked for calorie-dense foods. It looked for sugary foods. And that's actually what kept us alive thousands of years ago, right? But sugar looked a lot different. Sugar was a bush. And yes, if you came across a bush of berries, you should eat all of them, because you may not come across another bush for miles and miles and miles and days. But that's not true in our world today. So I gained back the 50 pounds, as you do when you go on a restrictive diet, and I gained another 50. So I gained 100 pounds in 1 year. And to gain 100 pounds in a year is very painful. You can feel the stretch marks coming in. And it was also humiliating. I was working at a very prestigious consulting firm and showing up at work week after week, month after month, getting bigger and bigger. And it wasn't anything that I could hide. So with other addictions, you can sometimes keep it under wraps. It's not out there for everybody to see and for everybody to judge. And of course, with food addiction, everyone looks at it through the lens of their own experience. So they're thinking, hey, I like cookies too, but I learned to control myself. Why can't you? I get it. Pizza's delicious. We all love pizza. I don't eat a whole pizza. Why can't you stop? And I couldn't stop. And the reason I couldn't stop is because my brain is different. It's wired a little bit different than everybody else's. It's no different than the alcoholic who can never enjoy a glass of wine, because as soon as they have that one glass of wine, they're off to the races. And that's the way it was with me and food. What is really interesting, though, is food addiction touched every single area of my life. Every area of my life was spinning out of control. I'd love to say that it was just the weight, but it wasn't just the weight. It was that I was in a bad marriage. But my consolation prize was I got to binge every night. I got to eat as much food as I wanted. So yeah, I hate being married to this guy. I hate going home at night, but guess what? I get to eat whatever I want. I was taking care of my mom with no boundaries. So I had intense codependent relationship. And I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure out how to make it better or how to have healthy boundaries, but that's okay. I'll just eat over it. I eventually got off work. I stopped working, and just the depression became so much. My weight, I woke up every morning thinking it was going to be different. I'd wake up filled with remorse and guilt for the night before, and starting that new diet yet again, that at this point could maybe last till 10, 11 a.m. And then it was done. It was done. And then there was a point where I even just stopped trying, and this disease just swallowed up my whole life. It took a whole life and made it so incredibly small, where it was basically home, television, eat, home, television, eat. And I wanted to die. And I was all of 29. When I think back to that, being 29 years old, so young, with my whole life ahead of me. And I was like, I can't master this. I can't do this anymore. Food is everything, and it's killing me, and I don't want to live. So that was pretty much my rock bottom time. And I really rebuilt my life, crawled my way out of that. Diets do not work for food addicts, because diets are about moderation. It's about learning to try to have your drug just a little bit, right? And so I don't ever diss diets. Like Weight Watchers is a great diet, but not if you're a food addict. Because if you're a food addict, you're trying to figure out how to get all your points into what you really want to eat, which are the drugs, the sugar, and the flour, and the deep fried stuff. So it doesn't work. The more peaceful route for me and for all the people that I coach and that I work with is to not have it at all. And you go through a really tough time of withdrawal, and you got to figure out how to work through cravings and urges, because that's what you're left with, right? At the end of the day, when you decide, yes, I'm addicted to these foods act like drugs in my body, what am I left with? I'm left with cravings and urges. But when you can build up the confidence and know that they aren't you, you're like thinking a craving isn't a command, thoughts are not commands, that I can separate myself from that, then you're in this land of freedom. You're in this land of neutrality with food. So that's kind of my story in a nutshell. Did you have any questions?
I have a million questions.
Great, good.
Thanks for being so honest and vulnerable. It was great. I really appreciate that. So another place in the, I guess the chain of events that for folks is right where you left off there is the cravings and urges. And I think maybe too, you can dovetail into it after, before, whatever, is this self-identification, maybe this stigma, maybe this self-diagnosis, if you will, of, am I a sugar addict? I mean, I'm not like those people, or I'm not like her. They would see your picture of the olden days, and maybe they've never been that big, and they would say, I'm not like that. I only got 30 pounds, 20 pounds to lose. My body's, I'm just a little bit bigger. So it's that self-identification. And I don't know where you want to put it in, but nobody is able or willing to seem to get what would be logical, would be, okay, well, if they think sugar or flour is a problem, why don't they just stop for 60 days and see how they feel? Well, most people who try this, and I've got 800, 900 people in a Facebook group, most people who just simply try this simply can't do it. No matter how much I teach them, no matter how many little lessons they get, they cannot stop for not even a week, but 30 or 60 days, forget about it. So that beginning part and that self-identification, I think for folks, maybe the stigma around it, I hope I'm articulating this right, but I think you've probably heard this many times from your clients. So.
Yes. Does food addiction even exist? And so I've been quite fortunate in Toronto that I've been able to partner with a couple of doctors who actually believe in food addiction, because that's the biggest battle, right? How can you be addicted to food? We need to eat. And I agree with them, but we're not actually addicted to food. Nobody's addicted to broccoli and chicken. What we're actually talking about is a chemically engineered product that looks like food, but isn't actually food. Right. And the food industry has put in a ton of science and a ton of money. It's $1 billion industry to make food-like substances that will light up your reward system in a way that's unnatural, in the way that cocaine does, so that you're addicted. And if you're addicted, you're a customer forever. So I always go back to, especially with the doctors, because they're the real tough sell. the DSM-5 has 7 criteria for substance dependency. And so I take them through those and I say to your patients, or you, even as yourself, as a person not unsure, do I have a problem with food or not? Let's go through this list and tell me if these identify with you. So I'll try to remember them all by memory. I don't know how well I'll do, but one of them is increased tolerance, meaning you need more of the substance to get the same effect. So I work with people who tell me, yeah, I used to be okay with a row of cookies and then half a box, and now I just annihilate the whole box. And then I go through the entire cupboard and I have no restraint. Whereas one time in my life, maybe I could have 4 slices of pizza, but now I'm eating the whole thing. So that's increased tolerance. Then you have people who withdraw. So when you mentioned trying to stop for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, the reason that they can't is because they start to experience withdrawal, but they don't even know that it is withdrawal. Withdrawal is painful. But what I try to teach my clients is withdrawal has a beginning and it has an end and it has a peak, and we all give in at the peak. And most people peak at 3 days. I don't know if you've noticed a pattern, but it's usually 3. The first day they're like, oh, this is not a problem. Why didn't I do this a long time ago? And day 2, they're like, it's getting hard, but I can do it. And then day 3, it's like, bets are off, I can't. It's because you're in withdrawal and it's super painful. Another one is unintentional overuse. Okay, so I'm using the language here from the DSM-5 that everybody agrees with. So unintentional overuse. Ever gone to a buffet and said you were going to have 1 plate, maybe 2? And so going up for the 4th plate and you can't stop. Right. Or you decided, you know what, it's my birthday, so I'm just going to have that 1 slice of cake. And then it didn't happen. And the cake's in the fridge and now you're eating the whole thing. That's called unintentional overuse. Another one is abandoning social activities, work activities because of the way you're eating, because of the way that you look. I have clients, I used to love swimming. I won't get in a pool. I have a choice between going out with my girlfriends tonight or staying home and eating, and I pick eating. Okay. The other huge one, the biggest hallmark for addiction, having consequences that you do not want, but you cannot stop using the substance. So you have consequences like reduced mobility. I am pre-diabetic. I have high blood pressure. My life and my health is in jeopardy, but I can't stop. I just can't stop. In face of these things, like I'm going to now be insulin dependent, but I can't stop the sugar. Then I say, and you're still questioning whether it could be an addiction when you're hitting all those marks. So I hope that answered that question about whether, just ask, look them up, the 7, because of course I can't remember the last 2. The DSM criteria for chemical dependency or dependency on a substance, and see how many you check off. Just change substance for sugar, flour products. I believe flour products are just as addictive. So I work with people, and this was true of me. Sugar really, I was like, I always found sugar a little bit too sweet. But give me pasta with a side of garlic bread, and then I'll have some French fries, and then I want pizza. That was my ideal binge. But guess what? All of that turns into sugar into my body. And now I understand what I was really looking for were huge serotonin hits. Sugar gives you massive dopamine hits. And dopamine is that desire that, I got to have it right now. I want it. That's sugar. And then food also raises our endorphins. It raises all 3 of our neurotransmitters, whereas other street drugs only hit dopamine. For us, food hits all 3. And so the other one, what was the other question? The other part was around the cravings and urges.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if they've kind of decided that they are a sugar addict or a sugar and flour addict, that they need to go through withdrawal. So how do they get there? I mean, even if they say, well, maybe let's say I maybe am. I don't know for sure, but I would like to try not having sugar or flour for 30 days. How do I get there when there's a lot of failure, like you say, in days 3 through 10 or whatever?
Okay, so there's 2 parts of our brains at work. Well, we have 3 parts of our brains, right? I'm not a scientist, so I'm going to do this really very low key. This is kindergarten level. So our brain stem, that makes sure our heart beats and we keep breathing. We don't need to worry about that part of our brain. It's fine on its own. Then we have the midbrain. And that's where they say addiction lives. The midbrain is responsible for compulsion, for fright or flight. It's what keeps you alive. It's the oldest part of the brain. And then we have the frontal lobe, later developed in human history. Frontal lobe is all about good decisions, good reasoning. It's the part of your brain that says you shouldn't eat sugar. You gotta fix this. Now, unfortunately, our midbrain is way stronger than our frontal lobe because that part of the brain is responsible for survival. When we are drinking, when we put in any substance, any mood-altering substance into our body, guess what we do? We inhibit our frontal lobe. Anyone make a bad decision when they drink? When you add a substance, a mood-altering substance, your frontal lobe gets inhibited. And sugar is a mood-altering substance, right? So I have these two parts of my brain in conflict. The other part that I'm working, so when you try to live this lifestyle and you're going to get off sugar and flour, you have to understand your greatest obstacle is going to be your mind and your thinking. It's not about finding the right diet, the right trainer, the right anything. It doesn't exist. Your biggest obstacle is going to be what's between your ears. Right. So if I can't trust my thinking, how do I outthink my thinking? Because my thinking keeps getting me in trouble. My thinking can make me think I'm hungry when I'm not, right? Anybody ever had a huge Thanksgiving dinner? They could barely breathe, right? And then the hot apple pie comes out of the oven. What happens? Oh, I have room for that. No, you don't. Your body's screaming, stop, I can't eat anymore. But your brain can trick you into thinking there's room for hot apple pie. Right. So what I teach my clients are a simple 3 steps, because remember, we're dealing with the midbrain. That's about survival, fright or flight. So we need something that's really quick, really immediate, to the point. When my brain starts taking over, telling me I should eat an entire pizza, I always say that that's my addictive voice. My addictive voice is a lunatic. I don't negotiate with lunatics. I don't try to get into a deep conversation. I don't try to rationalize with a lunatic. So what I tell my clients and what's worked for me is a craving is always a lie, period. A craving is always a lie.
I'm liking that. I like that.
Yeah, and this is what the lie sounds like. This time, just have one cookie. You deserve this. You've had such a bad day. Why don't you just have a slice of the cake and then go to the gym and it'll all be fine? And so whatever it is, and I've worked with people for years now, our addictive voices only have 3 to 5 lies. It's not as sophisticated, because it's not coming from the sophisticated part of your brain that reasons and has logics. It's coming from the midbrain. So the lies are really simple, and it's like 3 or 4.
They sound so logical.
They sound logical when you're like in the midst of a craving, right? This time it'll be, of course it'll be different this time. Or guess what? It's a vegan dessert. So there is no refined sugar. They just took 45 dates and put it into a food processor. That's fine, right? It makes perfect sense.
They make my teeth hurt. They're so sweet.
So that's the first thing I teach people. Every time you have a craving, once you make that decision, so you've made the decision, I'm not having sugar and flour. I do that one day at a time. I do that one meal at a time. I don't talk in terms of the rest of my life. And that's an important piece for all addicts to remember, whatever you're addicted to. Because if I start thinking that I'm not going to do something for the rest of my life, I get huge anxiety. And it gives a little in for my addictive voice to go, really? Really? You know what you're going to do for the rest of your life? Like, how can you even make that promise? And that's true. I can't make that promise. Right. So I bring it down to, I've already had lunch. And I'm going to have dinner, and I am 100% confident for dinner today, I will not have sugar and flour. Tomorrow morning, I can't promise you anything about tomorrow morning. It hasn't come yet. Okay. So it's a lie. The next thing that I do is I understand that this is a brain glitch. This craving is a brain glitch. Whether addiction touches 4 parts of our brain. It touches our reward center. So I'm looking for a high. Maybe I saw the perfect chocolate cake with an ooze middle. So now I have a dopamine rush. And now I'm craving, I'm salivating, right? So is it that? So it touches our reward center. It touches our habit center. So is it 3 o'clock? And at 3 o'clock, I always have something sweet. And whether I'm full or not, my brain goes, hey, it's 3 o'clock, knock, knock. Go do what you always do, because our brains are super efficient. And as soon as neurons that fire together, wire together, and then you don't need to think about it anymore. So if 3 o'clock always equals something sweet, you'll never have to think about it again, because you've done that for years. So then once you get that habit under control, you have euphoric recall. And that can be such a, that's a tough one, right? Suddenly I'm in Paris and I remember what those buttery croissants that melt in your mouth are like. And when am I ever in Paris? So I have to have that buttery croissant, right? Euphoric recall. And then if you manage to get all that under control, then you have stress. It's a game of whack-a-mole. Stress. So when you're under major stress in your life, something horrible has happened, you're going through a divorce, a death, something really major, all the tools, all the interventions that you've learned are no longer available to you, right? Or very difficult to be available to you. And your brain goes to default, goes to, we know what will comfort you. What's always comforted you. Just go down this path of least resistance. So once I call the craving out as a lie, I consciously look for the brain glitch. I'm like, what's going on? Is it euphoric recall? Is it habit? Is it that I got a dopamine surge because I saw the McDonald's golden arches? What? Because I need to start separating myself from this craving, because this craving isn't me. It's my addictive voice. It's just neurological junk that's coming up. And then lastly, I take 3 deep breaths, because what I learned from working with addiction doctors is craving management is anxiety management. Cravings cause a lot of anxiety, but most of us don't feel the anxiety because we act quickly and eat. But when you're trying not to eat, man, you feel that anxiety. And, the anxiety almost is like, am I going to give in this time? Like, am I going to give in? Am I going to lose 3 hours, 3 days, 3 months to this giving in to this urge and this craving for this sugar? Like, how long will this binge going to last? What is it going to cost me? So those are the 3 steps that are quick and immediate and easy to remember. Even if you just remember it's a lie. Like, for a lot of my clients, they're like, that was just revolutionary. Like, I never have to believe that lie again. There is absolutely no good reason for me to ever pick up this stuff again. So it's a lie. Where's the brain glitch? And 3 deep cleansing breaths.
I love that. It's just a lie. That is awesome. That's a great trick, and I'm gonna steal that if you don't mind. But
no.
Okay, so the next frontier that I've found, and I think it's replete in all the literature, and I see all the time, is this. Some people, like if they used to be athletes or they decide to take up walking or running or whatever, some people can substitute exercise. They can get 30, 60 days down the way, or they can get a year and they can lose 50 or 100 pounds. And then all of a sudden, bam, they're back in it. They gain the 50 back. They gain another 50 like you did. And is it your opinion that when they're in that, like 30, 60, 90 days to a year and beyond, in what you and I would probably call recovery, which people are not really ready to accept yet, do they need to excavate, if you will? Do they need to dive into these ACEs, these adverse childhood experiences, these reasons why the anxiety begins to bubble up or something, or they can't handle a life situation, a divorce, their children, their boss, their whatever? Their system of managing their emotions was always sugar or flour or food, and now it's not there, and they haven't developed a new one. Maybe they're not an athlete, or maybe they didn't go to yoga, they don't get massages, or they don't have any friends. How does that second step, in other words, staying off sugar and flour, making it a new lifestyle, evolve? How do you teach that all important life of recovery, or that next step after they get a few 30, 60, 90 days in?
Yeah, so interesting with the trauma work. So we just opened, just to give you a little bit of background where I'm going to come with this trauma work, I run a 28-day residential treatment program here in Canada, the first of its kind at Renfrew. So Renascent has been around since the 1970s. It's a treatment center for drugs and alcohol. They have an amazing reputation, have helped thousands of addicts recover, and now they've finally opened their doors to food addicts.
Does Dr. Tarman work there?
Yes, I work with Dr. Tarman.
Yeah,
Yes.
She's on the event.
What's that?
She's on the event.
Oh, good. So, and it is of Dr. Tarman's opinion and my opinion. I'm not speaking for her, but I share a similar opinion in that we don't do trauma work until you have solid recovery under your belt.
Yeah.
And we need to not see, I grew up in the era where there was this thought that if you could just figure out what's eating you, you can stop eating. Not true. It's actually not true, because then you're taking away from the fact that it's a chemical dependency on these chemically engineered foods.
Right.
And I was able, through therapy, to find out exactly why I started eating and maybe even the day that I started eating. And it made absolutely no difference. I still had to get off my drug and I had to get it out of my system. So these, if you're mentioning somebody who's been off sugar and flour and clean off of that for, you said 90, 60 days, and maybe they're struggling with a relapse. Do you need to start cleaning up your life? For sure. And here's why. If you have a part of your life that's incredibly dysfunctional, for myself, that was my marriage. And I had a year of recovery under my belt, and my marriage was causing me a tremendous amount of emotional pain. Guess what addicts want to do when they're in emotional pain?
Eat.
They want to eat. So I had to clean up my marriage and I should have, because who should live in pain? Who should have a marriage where it causes you so much emotional distress? So is it dependent upon my recovery? I don't know. It's a chicken and egg thing, but we do have to look at all of we have to shine a light over our entire lives. Mm. And we have to look at the places that are causing us tremendous amount of pain. Because at the end of the day, I have this addict brain. It's going to be attached to my body till the day I die. And I have to be acutely aware that if I have an area of my life that's super dysfunctional and causing me a lot of pain, it's going to drive me to eat. And yes, I can use, these 3 steps that I've talked about, and I can use my support group. But boy, I'm just making my life that much harder. I got to clean it up.
Right. Yeah, no, it does. So, I had a question. I forgot it now. It's a good one too. No, it'll come to me. What am I missing on this? So what would you like to get? What message would you like to get out? Say you were able to be speaking to thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds possibly of thousands of people. What message would you want to get out for people that are trying to get off sugar or they're at least open now and willing to look at the sugar in their life by witness that they're watching this event or whatever? What would you like to get? What information would you like to get out to them?
Yeah, I often get asked, what was the turning point? What was that magic thing that happened that made you turn your life around?
Good question, yeah.
Yeah, I lost over 100 pounds over, I guess now it's been 13 years, which statistically is almost impossible to do. It's less than 3% of the population. Sure. The reason I was able to do that was because I didn't go on a diet, but because I treated it as an addiction. Mm. So my journey actually started, I'm 29, I'm over 260 pounds, and I made a decision that regardless of whether I lose another pound or not, I can't eat this way anymore. I can't live like this anymore. Because I had spent my whole life eating to appease the scale. How much can I eat and still lose weight? Can I have a cookie and still not gain weight? The prize was always the number on the scale. And so for me, when I said, you know what, I'm smashing the scale, my weight is none of my business. My business is to move my body in ways that I enjoy and to stay away from my drugs. That's my business. And wherever my weight ends up, it ends up, because that number never made me happy. And so when I did that, and I also decided I have to eat to be sane. So whether I lose a pound or not, I surrender. I give up. It doesn't even matter anymore. And it was so weird because the minute I stopped focusing on the weight and didn't care. Then I lost over 100 pounds, right? But yet all the years, over a decade of working so hard to lose 2 pounds, right? I couldn't do it. And then as soon as I let go, then the weight let go too. And so that also meant that I accepted myself and loved myself exactly as I was at 260 pounds. The lumps, the bumps, the stretch marks, everything. I had to love myself. And I know that sounds like a cliche, but the truth is love is energizing. Hate will drain you. So when I'm working with somebody and they tell me I have no motivation, it's so hard to get off the couch, I'm like, what are you thinking? Let me hear what's going on in your head. And I usually hear such self-judgment, such disgust, such punishing mental environment. I'm like, yeah, if I thought those things, I'd still be in bed right now. I wouldn't get out of bed either. Right. So understand that our thinking affects our actions. My thinking affects the way I eat. My thinking affects whether I exercise or not. My thinking affects my motivation. So when I came from a place of self-acceptance and self-love, okay, that energized me. So I always challenge people, is your thinking draining you or is your thinking energizing you? Because you're going to need as much energy as you can muster to do this.
I like it. So you probably get this too. I get it all the time, and it just never ends. When a new person comes in, even though they, the writings that they're supposed to have read, they didn't maybe. They always want to know what to eat. It's so exciting that we're, 40 minutes in here. You haven't mentioned one thing about what do you eat. And I love that it's not a function. I mean, yeah, you've got to eat the right things. You've got to have a healthy, nutritious diet. But it's not about the food in so many ways. So what do you tell them when, do you got any recipes for this? What's this?
No, I can't. That question drives me crazy. The recipes. Right?
It's paleo and keto and veggie and whatever. I mean? It's like portions and, the food groups got portions and this. So what do you tell them when they ask, what do I eat? If I keep flour and sugar, what do I eat?
So a couple of things. When I work with people, I have an outpatient program as well. When I work with people, I do provide a meal plan. And so I don't follow it all the time. So let me explain that. So sugar and flour, not negotiable.
Right.
So I do have a meal plan that's weighed and measured. So for the most part, if I'm home, I will weigh and measure my meals because I want to make sure that I'm actually getting enough, especially the vegetables, right? We all want to cheat on the vegetables. And when I go out to restaurants, and I don't think it's necessary for me to have to do that. For some people, the idea of following a meal plan where it's all ounces measured out, it's too much for them and it's too triggering because they have been on so many diets, right? Even though this is not a diet, this is actually a meal plan to make sure you get enough food. Most people complain it's too much food. Mm. And I say to them, fine, just eliminate sugar and flour and eat whatever you want. And in terms of recipes, no, I don't have recipes because I'm not one to cook. I'm just like, what do you normally eat? Whatever it is that you eat, just eliminate the sauces, eliminate the sugar, and eliminate the flour. So if you're Italian like myself, you don't need to give up pasta because guess what? Spiraled zucchini with an amazing meat sauce and cheese tastes the same. So don't give up pasta because you're Italian and that's such a big part of it. Have it. Or if rice is the staple of your diet, guess what? Cauliflower rice, you will not taste the difference. I promise you, if it's seasoned correctly. So just eat what you normally eat. Don't change it. Just figure out a way so that those two addictive substances isn't a part of it, right? And so I always say your brain is the best Google search in the world because I'll get calls like, this restaurant has nothing for me. Yeah, if you've decided that, you're right. But when I look at a menu, I say, what is the best option for me to have at this restaurant? And suddenly, just like Google, all the good stuff comes to the top. It's the weirdest thing. Suddenly, I see the side menus. Like, you know how you can order sides? And I'll see like sauteed spinach. And I'm like, okay, great, that's great. And then I see that they're on this dish, there's grilled chicken. I'm like, oh, I can put that and that and that. I put it all together and then I have my meal. Whereas someone else who's sitting beside me who's decided there's nothing on this menu for me to eat goes, there's only pizza. I'm like, really? There's only, because I just put a meal together without pizza, or I've gotten calls at a grocery store where there's nothing for me to buy here. In the 3,000 item grocery store, there's nothing but sugar and flour is what you're telling me. Yes. Your mind will answer, just like Google. Ask Google anything. Ask Google, will blinking kill me? Google will say yes. Right? Like, it doesn't matter. Ask an intelligent question, you get an intelligent answer. Ask a not so intelligent question, you get an unintelligent answer.
No, I really appreciate it because it does get old, and I try and tell people it's not about the food, and they don't get that part. But that's a great answer. So
just give up sugar and flour and eat whatever you want. And all they hear is eat whatever you want, and they get happy.
Right. Well, I'm enjoying the heck out of this, and we could go on for hours, but we want to get your website and books in. But a couple of questions. How do you see this all? Well, you say you have a daughter, and maybe. And how do you see this all playing out? How do how does your daughter look at the world as it revolves around sugar and flour? The kids always want to have sugar, they want to have some sugar, whatever, with their friends. And then how do you see this all playing out? I mean, are you focused at all on, kids' health or other people's health? Obviously, you work in the health field and help people with this. So tell us about the kids and how you see this all playing out.
Yeah, so my daughter is 6 years old, and she does eat sugar. So not everybody is a food addict, right? It's like not everybody is an alcoholic. Is alcohol good for you? No. Can you enjoy a glass of wine if you're not? Yes, right? And so with my daughter, I'm teaching her to make very conscious decisions. So we talk about sugar is really bad. This is what sugar does to your body. I lost my mommy when she was 69 years old because she ate too much sugar. And so I just want her to make really informed decisions and know what she's eating. So there's no lies about it. I wish, that she would eat the way I eat, but she won't. She just won't. She's a very picky eater, and she eats like a typical 6-year-old. But the good news is she doesn't have trauma in her life. So there's one factor that hopefully will keep her away from food addiction. And, I'm going to keep a close eye on it. And hopefully I won't see the switch over, because I've seen it with my nieces. Because all kids love sugar. But I can remember seeing it with one of my nieces when it switched for her. And then I was right. And it's hard because I wasn't her mom. And in terms of what I want to do, so it's very interesting. I do want to start a foundation for ending child obesity. So I'm going to take a proceeds of all my sales and it'll go into my foundation. And my daughter and I've tried to recruit my daughter. She's not as excited as I hoped she'd be, but I told her about the foundation and that we're going to go into schools together and do presentations and show children what the food industry is doing so that they are not hypnotized or brainwashed, but that they can see what's happening with their eyes open, that these are drugs that are being manufactured, what the food is, just like the cigarette industry, just informing them, letting them know what can happen if you abuse these sorts of foods. Because my hope is, even though my daughter's not on board yet, is that her foundation will put me out of business. So that we don't have food addicts in the future, that nobody will need my services in the future, that we can end it at childhood.
Nice. I like that a lot. Yeah, I mean, I raised a couple of sugar-free kids till they were 6, and then I, kind of lost control a little bit.
Wow.
I mean,
good for you to do it till 6. That's pretty good.
Well, we were controlling the diet at that point. You know what I mean? We were like, there was not. It was harder at the school, Montessori school, at the relatives and whatever babysitters. They were depriving them or something. Or
I know.
But anyway, they were my little experiments. But I really believe children should have choice. I'm with Dr. Lustig, who believes that you should be 18 and have ID to purchase sugar.
Wow, I like that.
Right.
That's awesome.
I really, I mean, it's kind of my next evolution in my information product stuff is like people won't do things for themselves a lot of times, but they will do it for their kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this idea that children should have a choice, and that if you're the one supplying the food to a 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, there's no reason you can't go 90% without sugar because there's no need, you know? So why not give them a choice? Why not get their palate accustomed to something a little different?
Yeah.
So tell us about how would people reach you? How would they find your website, your work? I don't know if you do meetings like this, Zoom,
Yes.
or whatever you do. How would folks, if they wanted to get in touch with you or read some of your stuff, where would they go?
So my website is sandraelia.com. So really easy. Sandra, and Elia is ELIA.com. And then I do an outpatient program through the Wharton Medical Clinic, and they have 6 clinics in Southern Ontario, and that's an 8-week outpatient program. We meet twice a week. I've been at Renaissance, where we have the 28-day program where you move in, you get off sugar and flour and put your life together. I also do retreats and one-on-one coaching. So a lot of different ways. I do a Zoom course as well on Monday nights. So all of that is actually starting up next week. I have 4 groups all starting up next week.
Oh, so let's see. We're about a month from the thing. We're pre-recording early, so we're going to be right there. It's going to be right there at that right time. Oh, perfect. Okay, good.
Good.
So excellent. I really enjoyed this. And like I said, I think you and I could talk for hours, but we have to keep it within an hour so that everybody else gets to watch it, all of them. So anything else, any last messages you want to leave the folks with?
Yes. I heard Michael Vallis, who is a great behavioral change specialist in Canada, say that the greatest predicator of future behavioral change is self-efficacy. That is the number one predicator of whether you're going to change your behavior. Self-efficacy is just the belief that you can. So that's why it's so important to break this down to 1 meal at a time, because if you break it down to 1 meal at a time, then you can be sure that you can do this. And if you're sure that you can do this, then you will have success.
I like that. Excellent. Sandra, thank you so much. I've enjoyed this. This has been awesome. And we'll be talking again really soon, I'm sure. Of the we're going to have some more follow-ups this year with the event, the summit. So
I look forward to it. Thank you for this amazing work and this summit and getting the word out and helping to end the suffering. Thank you.
All righty. Take care now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.